August 14th, 2004. A correctional officer at ADX Florence refused to finish his shift. He dropped his keys on the concrete floor, walked out of D Block, and never came back. They said he was trembling, eyes wide open, mouth dry as if he'd seen something impossible. When asked what happened, he only said one thing. He's still in there. I heard him. The officer was talking about inmate William Harlow, a man who had died 6 months earlier. But inside ADX Florence, America's most secure Supermax, death doesn't always mean silence. Because here, in the prison built to contain the world's most dangerous men, even the guards fear the chew. Yet, this is a story of ADX Florence. The silence that watches back. They say silence doesn't kill you until you work at ADX Florence. There's a guard who used to say, the silence here isn't quiet, it breathes. Every time he walked past cell block H, he'd feel it watching him, not the inmates, the silence itself. It's 2:47 a.m. The motion sensors in the north wing flicker for a second. No movement, no breach, just a flash of static. The hallway lights hum, bouncing teal off the concrete. The guard, Officer Reyes, tightens his grip on the flashlight. He's worked here 12 years, but tonight, his hands won't stop shaking, because this is a part of ADX where even the guards avoid eye contact with the cells, where the walls remember what you say, where some men whisper they've seen things move when no one was there. Reyes walks slowly, boots echoing down the corridor. Every door is sealed, soundproof glass, steel reinforced, no communication, no contact. And then a voice, a faint whisper, coming from a cell that hasn't housed an inmate in 7 years. He freezes. The air feels thick, heavy. He shines a light toward the door. Cell 213. Empty. He knows it's empty. He signed the clearance papers himself. But that whisper, it said his name. And in that moment, Reyes realizes something most people never understand about ADX Florence. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's something you can feel, pressing against you, crawling into your thoughts. ADX Florence, the world's most secure prison, home to the most dangerous men in America, terrorists, killers, gang leaders, and those the system can't control anywhere else. But behind these walls, even the staff aren't immune to what this place does to the human mind. That night was only the beginning, because in the days that followed, every guard on Reyes' shift started hearing the same thing. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in sealed blocks, the sound of breathing through reinforced glass. And one question began to spread to the ranks like wildfire. If no one's inside those cells, then who's making the sound? The beginning of the end. Before that night, ADX Florence was just another post on the Colorado plains, a concrete fortress in the middle of nowhere. It was designed to be the end of the road, a place where inmates are locked in 23 hours a day, alone, silent, unseen. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But what people don't know is that the silence here doesn't just punish prisoners. It breaks the staff too. Reyes used to joke with new recruits. If the inmates don't lose their minds, the guards might. It wasn't far from the truth. Every door, every corridor, every control panel. It's designed to separate human from human. Even when officers speak to inmates, it's through an intercom. When they deliver meals, it's through a steel slot. When they search a cell, it's under camera supervision, with zero physical contact. Everything at ADX runs on isolation. Total, complete isolation. And after years of working there, Reyes began noticing the patterns. Officers who started forgetting what day it was. Guards who'd wake up from nightmares hearing cell doors slam. One even quit after saying he saw an inmate staring at him from a cell that had been empty for a decade. Some called it paranoia. Others called it the echo. It's what happens when you work in a place so quiet, your own heartbeat starts to sound like someone else's footsteps. Reyes didn't believe it. Until the night it happened again. The second whisper. It's 3:12 a.m., night shift again. Reyes and his partner, Officer Lyle, walked past the isolation block, the section that once held men like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Cells once filled with noise, now empty. Reyes turns his head. There, faintly, that same voice again. Only this time, Lau hears it too. A whisper, low, deliberate, like a man speaking through walls. They rush to the control room, check the feeds. Nothing. Every door sealed. Every motion sensor clear. Every inmate accounted for. And then, a moment later, one of the cameras freezes. Static, just for a second, then returns to normal. But in that single frozen frame, there's a shadow, a faint outline in the middle of cell 213. Too tall to be a reflection, too still to be a trick of the light. Lyle swears. Reyes stays silent. They replay the footage frame by frame. When they zoom in, the shape is gone. And that's when Reyes remembers something that sends chills down his spine. Cell 2-1, 3 used to belong to Thomas Silverstein, the man who lived in isolation for decades, until he died inside this very prison. A man who hadn't spoken to another human being for 36 years. And now, somehow, the silence he left behind wasn't empty anymore. The guards start to crack. Within days, the rumors spread. Guards refused to patrol certain corridors alone. Cameras kept freezing on random cells. And even the wardens started asking questions. They checked for technical malfunctions. Nothing. They tested the walls for sound leaks. Silent. Everything about ADX was working perfectly. Yet no one could explain what was happening. And that's the terrifying truth about ADX Florence. It's not haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by silence. By the psychological weight of endless emptiness. Reyes started recording his night shifts on a small pocket recorder. Sometimes, when he played it back, he could hear faint breathing. Other times, just his own voice echoing into nothing. But one night, he heard something different. A whisper, 3 words, so clear it froze him in place. Don't turn around. He dropped the recorder. The next morning, Reyes didn't come back to work. To be continued, because ADX Florence isn't just a prison, it's a mirror. A place that doesn't echo your voice, it echoes your mind. The guard who vanished into silence. The report said Officer Reyes clocked out at 6:02 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. But the cameras never showed him leaving. His car was still in the lot. His locker was still open. His uniform cap left sitting neatly on the bench, as if he knew he wouldn't need it again. When they searched the control wing, they found his flashlight, still on, flickering against a far wall of cell block H. And on the floor beside it, his recorder. When they pressed play, it started with the sound of his boots, slow steps, echoing down a hallway that should have been silent. Then a long pause, followed by breathing, faint, heavy, uneven. And finally, just one line, whispered so quietly it almost didn't sound human. He's not alone. Then the tape cuts. The warden ordered an immediate lockdown. Every corridor, every cell, every vent searched. But nothing turned up. No signs of struggle. No traces of blood. No open doors. Reyes had simply disappeared. For weeks, the facility ran under emergency protocol. Officers were transferred. Psych evaluations became mandatory. But the silence, that heavy, crushing silence, never left. And that's when the others started hearing it too. Chapter 5, Part 2. The echo spreads. Officer Lau was the first to report it. He'd been on shift for barely an hour when the hallway lights dimmed for a few seconds. Standard power fluctuation, nothing new. But when they came back on, he said he could feel something watching him. Not see, feel. The kind of feeling that crawls up your spine before your mind can explain it. He tried to shake it off, kept patrolling. King opened the next security door, and that's when the radio static kicked in. A voice cut through. Faint, warped. It said, Lyle. He froze. Then again, Lyle stopped walking. He turned off the radio, thinking it was interference. But the voice didn't stop. It got louder, echoing inside the hallway, not from a radio. He ran. By the time he reached the main control room, his pulse was racing. And on the monitors, every camera in cell block H was flickering between static and frame freeze. Each flicker showed the same thing. The corridor empty, then full of shadows, then empty again. The warden reviewed the footage that night. when they slowed the playback down to a single frame. Someone was standing behind Lyle, just for a split second, still, unmoving, barely human in shape, and then gone, inside the reports. The investigation into Reyes' disappearance was quietly closed a month later. The official report blamed it on a psychological breakdown, a term that had become all too common at ADX Florence. But inside the confidential logs, there were notes that never made it public. Multiple audio anomalies recorded between 2 to 4 a.m. Camera feed distortions isolated to cell block H. Officer Lyle transferred to desk duty after a breakdown during shift. Staff requesting reassignment, citing unexplained sensory distress. It wasn't ghosts. It wasn't spirits. It was something worse. ADX Florence had become so quiet, so devoid of human sound, that it started creating its own, a psychological phenomenon known as acoustic hallucination, when the brain, starved of noise, starts making its own. But that didn't explain one thing. The final 3 seconds of Reyes' recorder, after the tape cuts off, technicians ran it through multiple filters, analyzing frequencies far beyond human hearing. And underneath all the static, buried deep in the recording, was a sound no one could identify. Not human, not machine. Almost like breathing, the return to cell 213. 6 months later, a new team was assigned to clear and renovate parts of cell block H. Fresh paint, new wiring, a chance to erase the ghost stories. But when one of the electricians entered cell 213, he found something behind the wall, a small square, cut perfectly into the concrete. Inside it, wrapped in dust and plastic, was a note. It said, "The silence hears everything." And at the bottom, a signature, R. Reyes. The handwriting was fresh. But Reyes had been missing for half a year. That night, one of the guards working a late shift said he heard something while doing rounds near cell block H. A voice, faint, familiar, whispering through the vents. He leaned closer, trying to make it out. It said, "Tell them I'm still here." He turned on his flashlight. The corridor was empty. The camera caught the whole thing, every second. And when the techs replayed it later, they noticed something strange. Right as the whisper hits the mic, the motion sensor in cell 213 flashes green. Active, but the cell is sealed. No one's been inside for years. To be continued, because ADX Florence isn't just where inmates lose their freedom. It's where silence takes something far greater. Their identity, their sanity, and sometimes even the ones guarding the door. The investigation that never ended. 2 weeks after the last incident, the Bureau finally stepped in. Officially, it was a routine inspection. Unofficially, it was about Officer Reyes, the man who vanished without a trace inside the world's most secure prison. 3 black SUVs pulled up before sunrise. No markings, no plates, just men in suits, holding folders stamped confidential, Federal Review. They didn't speak to the press. They didn't answer to the warden. They went straight underground, into the heart of ADX Florence, the room with no sound. Special Agent Keller was leading the team. A calm man, silver hair, ice blue eyes, spoke like every word cost money. He'd investigated everything from organized crime to prison corruption, but he'd never seen anything like this. When he stepped into cell block H, he stopped cold. The air was heavy, like stepping into another world. Even his footsteps sounded wrong. No echo, no bounce, just swallowed. He tested it by snapping his fingers. Nothing. One of his techs looked up, pale. "Sir, the sound waves are being absorbed. It's like the room's dead." Keller frowned. "Rooms don't go dead. People do." They moved deeper down the hall, and that's when the radios began to hum. Low static, like a heartbeat trying to find rhythm. Keller didn't believe in superstition, but even he couldn't ignore what the data showed. Acoustic interference, magnetic spikes, power surges. All isolated to Reyes' last patrol route. And in every piece of recorded audio, one constant remained. A faint breath, always behind whoever was recording. The door that shouldn't exist. The next day, the maintenance chief led Keller's team to cell 213, where Reyes' note was found. They scanned the concrete wall. No openings, no cracks, but the blueprint said otherwise. Behind that wall was a service corridor, sealed off since the 1990s. It wasn't supposed to exist anymore. They broke it open. A blast of stale, freezing air escaped, carrying the smell of rust and something else, something metallic and damp. The flashlight beams cut through layers of dust, old handprints on the walls, and at the far end, a small maintenance chamber filled with ancient wires and equipment. But there was something written on the wall in black marker. The quiet room. Underneath it, carved in deep scratches. I can still hear them. The team fell silent. Keller stared at the markings, then whispered. Reyes didn't vanish. He found something they were meant to forget. The tapes that were never meant to be found. Inside the quiet room, they discovered an old storage locker. Inside it, 7 cassette tapes labeled only by date, each one marked between 1989 and 1994. That's when ADX Florence was first being tested, before it even officially opened. They played the first one. Static, crackles, then a voice, older, rough. This is Warden Fisher. Testing phase 1 of sensory isolation. Keller's expression hardened. He knew that name. Warden Fisher had been one of the architects behind ADX's design, a man obsessed with silence as control. He believed noise made inmates resistant. Silence, he said, breaks the soul faster than chains. The tape continued. Subject has been isolated for 47 days. No conversation. No sound. He began talking to the walls after week 3. Now he claims the silence talks back. The tape ends abruptly. Keller looked at his tech. Was this ever declassified? The tech shook his head. These recordings don't exist in any archive. The man behind the walls. The 6th tape was labeled March 12, 1991. A different voice this time. The inmates. I hear them at night. The air moves like it's breathing. I think the walls remember. Then a pause. A whisper, distant but clear. You're not supposed to hear this. And the tape ends. Keller felt a cold sweat run down his neck. Every man in that room heard it too, that second voice. But none of them could explain it. The return of the noise. Later that night, while the agents reviewed data in the observation bay, all of ADX's systems glitched at once. Monitors flickered, cameras looped, and through the intercom, the sound returned. A low hum, then the breathing, the exact same rhythm from Reyes' recorder. The intercom speakers started to shake from the frequency, but every monitor still read. No audio input. Then a faint whisper came through. He's still here. The lights went out. When they came back, one of the technicians was gone. Vanished, just like Reyes. The end of the investigation on paper. By dawn, the Bureau ordered the entire operation classified. Every file sealed under Project Silence. Every name redacted. Every recording destroyed. Officially, the report stated, electrical failure, system malfunction, no staff casualties. Unofficially, Keller never returned to ADX. He retired 2 weeks later. No interviews, no statements. But before he disappeared from public life, he sent one final encrypted message to a colleague at Quantico. It contained a single line of text. What? Ever since that prison, it's not the inmates we should fear. To be continued. Because in ADX Florence, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of something else. Something waiting. Something listening. And next, we'll find out what happens when that silence decides to answer back. The echo that shouldn't exist. 13 years had passed since Keller last set foot in Florence, Colorado. He'd grown older, a recluse now, living quietly in a cabin near Pikes Peak. Most people in town thought he was just another retired Fed trying to forget the job. But Keller wasn't hiding from the world. He was hiding from what he'd heard inside ADX Florence. Every night, the same sound replayed in his dreams. That breath, slow, rhythmic, too human to be mechanical, too hollow to belong to anyone alive. He told himself it was memory. An echo burned into his brain from stress and paranoia. Until one morning, he turned on the radio and froze. A static burst came through the speaker. Then a voice, faint but unmistakable. "He's still here." Keller nearly dropped his coffee. The exact same whisper he heard the night of the blackout. Only now, it wasn't coming from inside the prison. It was broadcasting on a public radio frequency. That same afternoon, his encrypted email flashed with a new message. No sender, no subject line, just 5 words. "It's happening again. ADX." He drove 6 hours straight through the Rockies, rain slicing through his windshield like shards of glass. By the time he reached Florence, the sun had dipped behind the jagged horizon. The prison stood in the distance like a monolith, cold, gray, and silent, exactly as he remembered it. Only now, the silence fell heavier, as if the air itself was holding its breath. At the gate, Keller showed an old ID badge, long expired, but somehow still recognized by the scanner. The guard tower lights flickered once as the gate opened. Inside, the halls looked the same. Sterile, empty, endless. But something was off. The fluorescent lights buzzed unevenly. And beneath that hum, there was again a faint breathing sound. Not through the speakers, through the concrete itself. He met with Warden Delacroix, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a voice that never broke composure. She didn't waste time. 3 staff members have reported auditory hallucinations, she said. 1 inmate hasn't spoken or eaten in 4 days, and another claims the walls are whispering his name. Keller raised an eyebrow. "And you call me instead of psychologist?" Delacroix leaned closer. "Because one of my guards wrote something on his locker before quitting last week." She slid a photo across the desk. In jagged black marker, the words read, "Tell Keller the quiet is back." He felt his stomach twist. No one inside the bureau should have known what that phrase meant. Delacroix studied him carefully. "You worked the last major incident here. Whatever this is, it's starting again." They began with the control room. Screens lined the walls. Over 1,000 cameras streaming every angle of the facility. But one feed, cell 421, kept glitching. Static distortion, brief flashes of movement. The cell was supposed to be empty. It was marked unassigned. Keller ordered the footage rewound. Frame by frame, they watched. The lights flickered. Then for half a second, the image stabilized. A silhouette appeared, sitting on the concrete bed, head tilted down. But the timestamp in the corner read 1989. Delacroix stared at the monitor. "That can't be right. This feed didn't exist back then." Keller didn't answer. He zoomed in on the figure, the posture, the shoulders, the faint outline of face. It looked exactly like Officer Reyes. That night, Keller stayed in the observation bay, reviewing every second of archive footage. The longer he watched, the stranger became. Every night around 3 a.m., the same glitch appeared. The same silhouette, same cell, same movement, head down, breathing steady. He leaned forward, whispering under his breath, "What are you trying to show me?" The monitor flickered once. Then a faint voice came through the speaker. "You left me here." Keller's heart stopped. He muted the feed, but the whisper continued, now coming from behind him. "You left me here." He turned. No one was there. Only the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint vibration in the walls. By morning, 3 inmates in adjacent blocks had refused to leave their cells. One of them, a former gang leader named Marcus Hale, was found standing completely still, facing the wall. He'd been like that for hours. When Keller asked the guards what happened, they told him Hale had started screaming the night before, saying he could hear someone breathing through the floor. Keller visited him. Through the narrow slot in the steel door, he saw Hale, eyes wide, body trembling, whispering to himself. "They said they'd never leave, man. They said they're still walking these halls." "Who said that?" Keller asked quietly. Hale looked straight at the door slot. "The guards." Keller frowned. "What guards?" "The ones from before," Hale whispered. "The ones you can't see." And then he pressed his ear to the floor, whispering again. They're right below us. That evening, Keller and Delacroix descended to the sublevel corridors, the same maintenance tunnels once sealed off after Project Silence shut down. The deeper they went, the louder the air seemed to hum. Metal pipes rattled softly, as if something inside them was moving. The air temperature dropped. And then, as they reached the last turn, the lights flickered. On the wall, spray-painted in faded letters, were the words, "Quiet room." Delacroix froze. This part of the prison isn't even on the blueprints anymore. Keller ran his hand over the cold concrete wall. It vibrated slightly under his palm, like a heartbeat. He took out a small recorder from his pocket, pressed play, and whispered, "What's in here?" The recorder played back immediately. But this time, instead of silence, there was a reply. "You know." The voice was identical to Reyes. They broke through the wall. Dust and mist filled the tunnel as light spilled into a small, windowless chamber. The smell of iron hung in the air. There was a chair, metal, bolted to the floor, old restraints, a cracked mirror on the far wall. And on the mirror, written in condensation, were 5 words. "It never stopped, Agent Keller." Delacroix stepped back, her hand trembling. Who could have? Before she could finish, the intercom system above them crackled to life. A voice, distorted but human, filled the air. "You hear it too now, don't you?" Keller looked up at the ceiling speaker. The voice continued, whispering slower, more deliberate. "Every sound, every breath is memory." The lights flickered once more, plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness, Keller could hear it clearly. Hundreds of faint breaths, rising and falling together, like the entire prison was alive. Then a final whisper, so close it felt like it came from right behind his ear. "Welcome back to the silence." The power snapped back on. The mirror was clean again. The words were gone. But Keller didn't need proof anymore. He knew what the prison had become. It wasn't just holding inmates. It was holding something much older. Something that fed on the absence of sound. Something that remembered every voice it had ever taken. And now it remembered him too. The echo of silence. There's a sound in ADX Florence that never leaves you. It's not the footsteps, not the metal doors, not even the screams from another cell. It's the silence, that heavy, endless silence that clings to your skin like dust, the kind that eats your thoughts, one by one, until you start talking to yourself just to prove you still exist. Even the guards feel it. They'll never say out loud, but you can see it in their faces, the way their eyes dart around those concrete corridors, like they're afraid of something they can't name. Because here, silence doesn't mean peace. It means the prison is listening. One night, Officer Daniels was doing his rounds. 3rd shift, the kind of shift where the lights flicker, and the air smells like cold metal and bleach. He walked past LD 213, the one that used to belong to inmate William Ghost Harlow. But that night, Daniels heard something. A faint voice. Whispering. He froze. Because Harlow had been dead for 6 months. Daniels turned his flashlight toward the slot in the door. Nothing. The light bounced off the steel walls and vanished into black. He shook it off, told himself it was events, maybe the wind. But as he walked away, he heard it again, louder this time, echoing through the corridor. "Do you hear it too?" His flashlight trembled in his hand. The voice wasn't coming from a cell. It was coming from behind him. Daniel spun around. The hallway was empty, but the silence that followed was worse than the sound. By morning, Daniels requested to be transferred. He told the warden he couldn't do another night in D Block. The warden just nodded. He'd heard it before. You see, ADX Florence doesn't just hold criminals. It holds memories. Whispers. The remnants of men who've long stopped being human. The inmates call it a box of souls. The guards call it hell on earth. The government calls it the administrative maximum facility. But everyone who's been inside calls it the tomb of the living. Back when ADX first opened in 1994, it was meant to be the end of violence. A place where no inmate could ever hurt another again. But the truth? It became a place where men stopped being men. Each cell is an 8 by 12-foot concrete coffin. A steel door with a slot barely wide enough for a tray of food. No contact, no warmth, no sound, except for your own thoughts echoing back at you. Some of America's most dangerous men were buried here alive. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Ramzi Youssef, the man behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. And Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the cartel boss who escaped every other prison except this one. They all shared one thing in common: silence. But that silence changes people. Some inmates start to hallucinate. They say they see faces on the walls, hear voices whispering through the vents. Others stop talking altogether. It's as if ADX swallows their souls and replaces them with echoes. One psychologist who used to work there said, after a while, they don't look at you anymore. They look through you, like ghosts waiting to forget what they were. And that's where the name stuck, Ghosts of Florence. Even the guards started believing it, because every time they walked through those soundproof halls, something felt off, like the building itself was breathing. There are stories of doors unlocking on their own, radios turning on with static, cameras picking up movement in empty cells. None of it officially reported, but passed quietly between officers during lunch breaks in whispers. Don't linger near D Block. Don't look too long at cell 213. And never, ever talk back if you hear your name. One day, a journalist was allowed a rare tour. He wasn't allowed to film or record audio, just observe. When he came out, pale and trembling, he wrote a single line in his notebook before leaving Colorado forever. In ADX Florence, silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of something else. They say no one escapes from ADX, but that's not true. Some men do, not through the gates, but through their minds. They retreat into memories, into fantasies, into madness. Anywhere but here, because here time stands still. A single day feels like a year. A single thought becomes a scream. And a single mistake echoes forever. That's why the guards fear the silence. Because silence is where men disappear, not physically, but spiritually. It's where their humanity fades, and all that's left behind is a shadow, a whisper in the dark. And maybe that's the real punishment of ADX Florence. Not the concrete, not the isolation, but the mirror it forces you to face. The one that shows who you become when the world forgets you exist. The prison doesn't need chains to hold you. It just needs silence. Because silence in that place is louder than screams. Clapperboard Odiaro voiceover style closing. They built ADX Florence to hold the world's most dangerous men. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. A graveyard for the living. Every brick, every echo, every whisper in those halls tells the same story. That when you take away a man's voice, his light fades, and all that's left behind is a ghost. So next time you hear about ADX Florence, remember, it's not just a prison. It's a mirror reflecting the darkest parts of humanity. The question isn't who's locked inside. It's what that silence turns them, and maybe even us, into, because in the end, silence doesn't free you. It haunts you,